If I live to 100, I would be so lucky, and another 62 more years, I don't expect that I'm going to get to the end of my life and be like, I figured it out. I think the beautiful thing part about it is I think that I was given this need for achievement to realize that it doesn't change anything, because the path of wanting to achieve and doing it through business and doing it through growing and all that stuff has actually lit up inside of me a spiritual journey that wouldn't have been there had I not wanted to go for those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I heard this, you reminded me of this story that's told about Benjamin Franklin. And Benjamin Franklin had 13 virtues. And these were all qualities that he aspired to develop in his life. Simplicity, authenticity, patience, things like that. And when he was on his deathbed, they asked him which one he didn't accomplish. Mm-hmm. And he said it was the 13th one. And they said, what was that? And he said, humility. And I love that, because I think what you're saying is humility doesn't mean you're meek or weak. It means I'm able to accept there's always more to learn. I don't know everything.
Yeah.
And it's okay. I'm going to give myself grace for it too. It isn't a feeling of I'm useless because I don't know. It's actually I'll become more useful if I recognize there are things that I still have to learn. And when I'm listening to you about your spiritual journey and that silence, I'm intrigued by that. Walk us through how you fill that void almost practice-wise, because I identify with that fully. And it's funny because we always talked about how our lives were kind of opposite.
Yeah.
Because when I met you, I'd kind of gone down this deep spiritual path,
right,
but I had no money.
Yeah.
And you were in the other boat where you had sustained yourself financially and created a really good, stable place for yourself, but you were seeking spiritually. And so we were kind of at, right? We had that conversation. And let's talk about that too. But I'm intrigued as to how does that couple of hours or whatever that time on your porch, like, how do you do that for people? Because I think we like the sound of that, but then we get distracted by the next thing.
What I've come to find, and I can speak within myself and just what I've seen from other people, but what I've seen within myself is that I've learned a lot of lessons from my dad. Most of them after his death and me processing things. My father was the way that he was, and he became an alcoholic because he had things in his past that he hadn't worked through. And the thing that he hadn't worked through is when he was 12 years old, my father heard a gunshot. He walked into the room and his dad had just shot himself in the mouth with a shotgun. And so my dad grew up in rural Tennessee. This is 1960s when this happened, 1960s when this happened. There wasn't a whole lot for him to understand it. There weren't podcasts. There weren't books to read like we have nowadays. And so I always consciously knew that what was happening was that he had not healed his pain. And Gabor Mate says, don't ask why the trauma, ask why the pain. And when I first heard Gabor Mate, I was like, oh my God, someone's finally saying what I always thought with my father. And so, we can look at him and say, oh yeah, he's an alcoholic and he didn't overcome his trauma. The trauma, the way it came up in my life is I became a workaholic. And so I didn't, sometimes we could see someone and say, oh, they drink too much alcohol, they do too much drugs, they eat too much food. And we can say, oh yeah, that's their addiction. The problem and the hard thing in our society is that my addiction of workaholic is rewarded. And people look up to it and they're like, you're doing so great, you're making so much money, all of this is so good. And what I came to find is that my workaholism was just basically me trying to not feel my feelings and to not work through and process those things. Like scrolling on social media could be that way for somebody.